when I didn't invite my husband's parents to our first ultrasound. Jake's rage boiled over, and by nightfall, he'd locked me out of our apartment, leaving me stranded in the biting Seattle cold, 8 weeks pregnant. I stood on the stoop, my hands trembling as I jiggled a useless key in the changed lock. My phone lit up with his text. "You cut my family out. You're cut out." The words stung like a slap, and I fought the urge to scream, my breath clouding in the damp air, the ultrasound photo clutched in my shaking fist. Jake and I had been married 2 years, together 5. We'd clicked instantly at a grungy bar near Pike Place, laughing over warm beer and our mutual loathing of Seattle's coffee snobs. He was my rock, quick-witted, handy with a wrench, and the one who pieced me back together after too many heartbreaks. But his parents, Linda and Tom, were a constant shadow. Linda nitpicked everything, my freelance design gigs, my lazy lasagna, even my ponytail. Tom just nodded, her silent echo. Since the pregnancy news, Linda's daily calls felt like interrogations, demanding details and pushing names like Gertrude with zero chill. I didn't mean to skip them for the ultrasound. It was a rushed appointment, slotted between vomiting spells and a client's 11th hour revisions. Jake was stuck at the auto shop, so I went solo. When I told him later, thinking it was no big deal, his eyes darkened. "You didn't tell my parents?" he hissed, his voice a coiled spring. I stammered. It was just one scan. I was overwhelmed, but he stormed off, leaving silence that screamed louder than words. Now, shivering on the stoop, guilt gnawed at me. Had I dismissed Linda's excitement too fast, but locking me out? Jake had never gone this far. Our worst fights, over money, dishes, never drew this kind of blood. My mom, back in Idaho, hadn't even seen the ultrasound yet. I wasn't shutting anyone out. I was drowning, pregnant, exhausted, and juggling deadlines. I was barely afloat. Fury surged, hot and sharp. I pounded the door, my knuckles stinging. "Jake, open this damn door!" I yelled, voice cracking. "I'm pregnant, it's freezing, and you're pulling this crap?" Silence. I dialed him, voicemail. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. Pulling out the ultrasound photo, I stared at our tiny, blurry bean. This was my kid, my fight. "You want to play dirty?" I muttered. Zipping my coat, I grabbed my car keys and marched to my Honda, slamming the door. If Jake thought he could break me, he was dead wrong. I'd sleep in the car, call a locksmith, anything but beg. I spent the night in my Honda. The seat reclined just enough to make my back ache, but not enough to sleep. The Seattle drizzle tapped the windshield, blurring the streetlights, while my phone stayed silent, no calls, no texts from Jake. By morning, my anger had hardened into something sharper, like a blade I was ready to wield. I drove to a coffee shop, ordered a decaf I barely touched, and called a locksmith. The guy quoted me $200 to get back into my own apartment. "Worth it," I muttered, picturing Jake's face when I walked through that door. Back at the apartment, the locksmith worked fast, but my heart pounded as the new key turned. Inside, the place felt wrong. Jake's work boots were gone, his jacket missing from the hook. A note on the counter read, "Staying at my parents'. Figure your shit out." My stomach twisted. He'd left? Just like that? I sank onto the couch, the ultrasound photo still in my pocket, now creased from my grip. I wanted to call him, to yell, but pride stopped me. Instead, I texted my best friend. "Mia, Jake locked me out. Now he's at his parents'. WTF do I do?" Mia showed up an hour later, her eyes blazing. "He did what?" she said, slamming a bag of bagels on the counter. I spilled everything, the ultrasound, Linda's overbearing calls, Jake's freakout. Mia paced, her voice rising. "Locking you out while you're pregnant? That's not just a red flag, it's a freaking siren." She pushed me to call my mom, but I hesitated. Mom would worry, and she was already stretched thin, caring for my sick grandma in Idaho. Still, Mia's words stuck. Jake's move wasn't just anger, it was control. By afternoon, I couldn't sit still. I drove to Jake's parents' house, a tidy split level in Tacoma, my pulse racing. I didn't know what I'd say, but I needed answers. Linda opened the door, her smile tight, like she'd been expecting me. "Oh, honey," she said, voice dripping with pity. "Jake's so hurt. Family means everything to him." I clenched my fists, biting back a retort about her constant meddling. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "He's out back," she said, stepping aside. I walked through the house, ignoring Tom's awkward nod from the recliner. In the backyard, Jake was splitting wood, his swings hard and deliberate. He saw me and froze, axe in hand. "What do you want?" he said, his tone icy. I stepped closer, refusing to flinch. "You locked me out of our home. Jake, you don't get to run to Mommy and play victim." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he'd swing that axe right through my words. Jake's grip on the axe tightened, his knuckles white, and for a split second, I wondered if I'd pushed him too far. The Tacoma air was thick with the scent of pine and tension, his parents' backyard a battlefield where neither of us would back down. "You don't get it," he spat, slamming the axe into the chopping block. "My family's been there for me my whole life, and you're acting like they're nothing." His words hit hard, but the accusation in his eyes, betrayal, raw and ugly, cut deeper. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. "I didn't invite them because I was barely holding it together. Jake, morning sickness, work, this baby, it's not about your mom." He scoffed, turning away, but I grabbed his arm. "And locking me out? Leaving me in the cold while I'm carrying our kid? That's not love. That's punishment." His jaw clenched, and he yanked his arm free, but I saw a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, in his eyes. Before he could respond, Linda's voice sliced through the air. "Is everything okay?" She stood at the back door, arms crossed, her tone implying I was the problem. I spun around, my patience gone. "No, Linda, it's not. Your son locked me out of our home because I didn't invite you to an ultrasound I barely made it to myself." Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. Jake muttered, "Don't drag her into this." But I was done playing nice. "Drag her in?" I snapped, my voice rising. "She's been in our marriage from day one, criticizing every move I make, and you let her—" "Jake!" The truth poured out, unstoppable. "I'm not the one shutting people out. You're choosing her over us." His face paled, and for the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Linda started to speak, but I held up a hand. "I'm not done. You want to be part of this baby's life? Act like it. But I'm not your punching bag." The twist came when Jake's dad, Tom, stepped outside, his usual silence replaced by a low, firm voice. "Jake, she's right. You crossed a line." My jaw dropped. Tom, the yes man, was siding with me? Jake stared at his father, betrayal mirrored in his expression. "Dad, you're taking her side?" Tom shook his head. "I'm not taking sides. You don't lock your pregnant wife out. That's not how we raised you." The air shifted, heavy with the weight of Tom's words. Linda looked stunned, her control slipping. Jake dropped the axe, his shoulders slumping. I didn't know what else to do," he muttered, almost to himself. I wanted to soften, to reach for him, but the hurt was too raw. "Figure it out, Jake," I said, my voice breaking, "because I can't keep fighting for us alone." I turned and walked away, my heart pounding, knowing this wasn't over, but something had cracked open, and there was no going back. Driving back to Seattle, the road blurred through tears I refused to let fall. Jake's defeated slump, Tom's unexpected stand, Linda's stunned silence, it all swirled in my head. heavy as the ultrasound photo in my pocket. I didn't know if we could fix this, but one thing was clear. I wasn't the villain Jake painted me to be, and I wouldn't let his family's shadow swallow me whole. By the time I reached our apartment, I'd made a decision, not for him, but for me and the baby. Jake came home the next evening, his eyes red, his voice soft. "I'm sorry," he said, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure he belonged. "Locking you out. It was wrong. I panicked." I stayed quiet, letting him squirm. He admitted Linda had been pushing him, filling his head with ideas that I was cutting them off. "I should have talked to you," he said, his hands fidgeting. "Not run to her." It was the first time I'd heard him acknowledge her grip on him, and it cracked something open in me. Not hope, not yet, but a sliver of possibility. We talked for hours, raw and unfiltered. I laid it all bare, how his parents' constant judgment made me feel small, how his silence enabled it, how terrified I was to become a mom under this weight. He listened, really listened, and promised to set boundaries with Linda. "She's my mom, but you're my family," he said, his hand brushing my stomach. I didn't fully trust it. Words are cheap. But when he suggested counseling, I nodded. We weren't fixed, but we were trying. A week later, I called my mom in Idaho. Her voice broke when I told her everything, but she said, "You're stronger than you know, kid. You've got this." I sent her the ultrasound photo, and her squeal of joy over the phone felt like sunlight after a storm. I even mailed a copy to Linda, not as a peace offering, but as a boundary. She'd be part of this baby's life, but on my terms. She called to thank me, her tone stiff but polite. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Looking back, that night on the stoop could have broken us. Instead, it forced us to face the cracks in our marriage, Jake's loyalty to his mom, my fear of losing myself. We're still navigating it, one messy step at a time, but I'm not fighting alone anymore. The baby's heartbeat, steady in the last ultrasound, reminds me what's at stake. I'm not just a wife or a daughter-in-law. I'm a mom, and I'll protect that with everything I've got. Thanks for reading, everyone. This was a wild ride to share. Drop a like, comment your thoughts, or share if you've ever dealt with family drama like this. I'd love to hear your stories.